people join, but I suggest we get going.
Sure.
My name is Doug Brunke, and you are amazing for being here, whether it's live or whether you're watching the recording. This is a outstanding series on leadership that we've asked Rutherford Pascal to comment on because we're all, I think, to some degree, maybe the word is not correct to say struggling, because I'll talk for myself. I'm struggling with keeping up and doing the things that I want to be able to do. And I always want to do more. I'm never happy with, almost never happy with the end result. It's always like, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And part of what's driving me is my own deficiency of being a hyperachiever. And I think another is that in this epic world where there's so much going on, the bar is really high. There's so much to be able to do. I will say that I'm very encouraged by what I see. I've kind of joked about how, yes, with all this kind of tariff stuff and trade, there's a lot of nonsense and craziness going on. But I've never seen as much interest in global business as I'm seeing right now. Never. The amount of interest by new people I've never talked to before from around the world is really exciting. And I think that must be a result of some of the craziness that's going on. So you know how we always talk about, when things are like really tough, that there's some silver lining to it. And I think part of the silver lining is a lot more interest in global business. That's good. I think certainly there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's hurting people making decisions on doing things. That's I think another reality that's going on. But it's also pushing the bar higher for leaders to be better. And so that's why we're having this conversation today. The actual title of the program is Leadership in a Time of Epic Global Opportunities. And I'll add challenges, epic opportunities. So who better to talk to than Rutherford Pascal, founder at Glass Walls Leadership. He's based in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is an expert on leadership. He's an expert on John Maxwell and his leadership principles. He was joking the other day because he got me reading John Maxwell, and I felt really good about myself that I've read about 10 or 12 of his books. And he said something like, well, you've got another 70 to go. Which I was like, my hyperachiever kicked in and is like, oh my God, like now I feel a lot smaller. But I guess how I feel is that I think I've probably read some of the best 10 or 12 of his books, because I did sort through and did some research and asked Rutherford, and I think I've got some of the best ones behind me. I've even read some of them 3 times. I read 2 of them 3 times, and a couple of them 2 times, and the others just once. And so I feel Rutherford better. I feel more in control, and I think after today, I'll feel better, and hopefully those that are watching will feel better as well. Would you like to say anything before we get going? Because the basic format is I've got a few questions for you. You'll answer them, and then I encourage everybody who's here live to ask questions along the way, and then we'll wrap up. What have I said that's wrong? What else should we be saying in preface to speaking with you today?
So what's interesting about what you said is this is not like Kilimanjaro or Everest, or you don't scale it and get on top and you've learned everything. You never learn everything. The beauty, I guess, with leadership is it's ever changing, ever evolving. Because if you think about 10 years ago, did we talk about hybrid? No, it wasn't a part of the lexicon. It wasn't part of what we talked about and had difficulty. So we're ever changing, we're ever learning, and we're always growing. If you remember how we ended the last call was talking about that none of us had all of the answers. So we had a couple of other leadership people on there, Michael, right? On and we all agreed that we're we might have a head start on the rest of you, but we have not solved Rubik's Cube yet at all. We are constantly learning. And the other thing I'll say to you about learning and coaching, what's really interesting is the best leaders go to other leaders to learn more about leadership. The best leaders, I think I talked to you about John Maxwell. When John Maxwell has visited the Pope I think two times. And the Pope is this great, not the one that just got announced, the one previously. I think the one before that also. And he said he went there with 30 questions to ask the Pope and asked zero because the Pope asked him questions about leadership.
Wow.
For an hour and a half. Because it doesn't matter how great of a leader you are, you want to know how you can get better. The greatest leaders, I should say, the best leaders want to know, hey, how would you handle this? Did I handle this in the situation the right way? We are constantly learning. And that's if we want to continue to get better, that's how you get better by learning from other really good leaders. So that's the only comment I'll add to your entree.
That was one of my great, not surprises, but really impactful approaches that John Maxwell has. In fact, that one book was How Leaders Ask Great Questions, or
Yes.
something to that effect. And he talks a number of times of meeting people. And actually, he paid. He early in his career, right? He reached out to a variety of people and said he'd pay not just for their lunch, but he'd give them money to be able just to sit down. And he learned early on to ask questions. And that whole book is around how to ask good questions, and it's amazing. So I'm very lucky because the questions that I have to ask you are ones you've coached me on. So it hopefully is beneficial for those of you who are watching, and it'll be beneficial to hear the answers. So let's get going with some questions. Before we do, Michael Patterson, you are on the call, and I know you've got to jump off. And I recently introduced you to Stephen Nikokiris. And the reason I did, he's with CBiz back east in Connecticut and New York, out of the New York office. And one reason I did is because his leadership style, in terms of how he approaches business and helping in a servant-oriented way, and the way he does business development, is very similar to you, at least in my eyes. And undoubtedly, that'll be interesting for you guys to talk because you guys have a lot of similarity. Who do you, based on what Rutherford just mentioned about great leaders, and you are a great leader, who do you go to for those questions? Because you're a unique character. I'm not sure there's very many people like you that have the leadership that you have in the service industry. Do you count on that from anyone?
Well, apart from people within our firm that are subject matter experts on certain things, I do, you have been a dear friend. Hank has been a dear friend. I do have people, and internationally, Eduardo Gonzalez Diaz de Leon, I look to as well. Glenn Williamson has a lot of stature and knows a lot of folks and has contacts at a level above and has a view, always has a different perspective. Hank's perspective is always different, etc. Carol Colombo at the District Export Council. I really think Carol is brilliant, and also has a heart and a good mind. Mel Sanderson
Yep.
is a seasoned professional who I love, and Mel always has good advice. Steve Zylstra, really, if it's something up on the political level, or if there's a lot of complicated facets to it, I'll just say, Steve, what do you think? You know what I mean? Because it's always good to me on something complicated to get multiple voices and to hear different perspectives. That's, obviously I read a lot and try to have an open mind, but I think good leader, you do this too, is you are constantly exposing us in the global chamber and yourself to many, many new perspectives, AI, things that are exploding. And it's just hard to keep up and to keep adjusting. But I think a good leader has to take the time in each day. That's why I keep showing up at things like this, because you're, as my daughter used to say, edumacating me.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And
Thank you.
those are all great people that you've talked to. And it reminds me, I need to get in touch with Carol Colombo, because I'd like her to moderate our Women in Global Leadership program on August 7th. So thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
This program will be questions to Rutherford, and I've got 4 or 5. I've actually got 4 that I had written down, and I'd like, Rutherford, if you don't mind, to ask you the same question that I just asked Mike in terms of who you turn to. You probably don't have John Maxwell on speed dial, but I'll bet you have his phone number or have a way of getting to him, but he's a little bit hard to access. Who do you turn to, and how do you recommend people approach that in terms of getting the kind of support from great leaders to help us each raise the bar for ourselves?
So it's a good question. So I have a person that was a colleague of mine that is also a leadership coach, trainer, person that knows me very well. We worked together at 3 separate companies. I always joke that I would leave the company and he would follow me 2 to 4 weeks later, which is in fact the truth. But and so we always talked, and this is what exactly what I was talking about. So I was a second line leader, and he and I talked daily about situations. I would talk to him about a difficult situation that was going to be thrust in the next 1 or 2 days, and I would talk to him about how I was going to address the situation or the problem, and he would either disagree, agree, or give me an alternative. And I think Mike Patterson talked about having different voices. That is critical. Is to have a different voice. So I had this person. His name is Mark. I had Mark to talk to all the time. I had a boss who I could also talk to, was another great leader, Bob, that I could talk to about different. So it was there was 3 people that worked with me, and interestingly, and this is, you might find this unique, but I had a boss who was the antithesis of that. So he was not a great leader. So I would figure out what he would do, and I try to do the opposite. So because and I'm not, that's not even a joke. That's actually the truth, because he would handle situations in such a way that it always landed badly, sorry. But those 3 people that I worked for or worked with were the 3 people that I went on a regular basis. But I will say this to you, that because of podcasts because of, Audible, books on tapes, whatever, you can get the John Maxwell or the other people like that who you on a regular basis, and you can find out a topic and search it, and they'll give you a way to handle it. They will absolutely give you a way to handle a situation. So, and we talked about AI. One thing, Doug, you can easily do is put together the situation that you're doing and say, please tell me how John Maxwell will handle it in AI. And you could figure out exactly, or Ed Milet or whoever, the person you follow.
That's amazing. One thing that he did that I thought was enlightening too. I don't remember exactly the context, but either he or someone else wanted to be a billionaire, and they were hanging out with millionaires, and basically the problem was overshoot where you want to be, right? Make
Yes.
sure that within that group of people that you're talking at things with, asking questions are above and beyond where your capabilities are, and where you want to aspire to be. And they're not always the people that we're hanging around with now. And that's that whole process that he did where he listed out all the people he wanted to speak with. And most of them, all of them in the beginning were nobody he knew. The Pope, that's we're not hanging out with the Pope, right?
Yeah. But it's you've heard the terminology, you want to be around the five closest people around you, the people you're gonna, you're gonna affect you the most. And you just have to get into a better room and to get into bigger situations. I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and a 22-year-old soon to be graduate of Arizona State asked me what he should do, and I told him to get mentors that are in their 40s, 50s, or 60s that are not where you want to be. They're 2 or 3 steps higher than you want to be.
Yeah.
Ever. And part of that is because those people are free to give you advice. They've also lived so many different experiences. They can give you great advice. And by the way, at that point, at the level they don't really, there's no competition, there's no care. So they're really free, and they want to help the younger generation, especially if you ask that people. So I would always tell people to don't look at people at the same level. Don't even look at people at the next level. Look at one level higher.
I love
Because
that.
they will help you get to the next level. And depending on where they are in their career, they might help you get to their level or higher.
Fantastic, great idea. I encourage everybody, if you've got a question, raise your hand. That would be ideal. Or if I missed that, just interject and unmute yourself. I'd like to ask the next question, and then everyone feel free to jump in with any thoughts or questions that you have. A lot of this conversation today is around international and some of the things that are related to those of us that are involved with global business and different cultures. And not everybody knows that. And we all know that as when we're in a contextual situation within a company, many people don't know international business, don't know different cultures. And so creating an inclusive decision-making process is not obvious unless you've been doing that or have had that experience. So I wonder, Rutherford, in terms of a leader who has a diverse team and wants to get different perspectives from members of their team from around the world, how would you recommend they approach that?
So you want to make sure that you include every voice, right? If you want great answers, if you want great outcomes, you have to get multiple inputs. to whatever question situation you're having, because you want to make sure that's what's happening in Italy and is the same thing that's happening in Spain or Germany or wherever, US, or if it same thing is happening in New York City is happening in Hawaii, or you have to get different perspectives. So what you always want to do is find a way that everybody feels included. So there's a terminology that I should say everybody, but the majority of people have heard recently. It's called psychological safety. Like, people want to feel psychologically safe to say what's on their mind with no negative ramifications. So part of the job of a leader is to build that trust, that trust that somebody knows that they can say whatever they want within, I say whatever, within reason from a business perspective, and feel safe to say that with no negative repercussions. So that's a huge thing, and that's one of the big things as a leader you have to build. Then you have to ensure that every voice is heard. Every voice is heard, and so and that's part of what you do to get the best answer and have the best culture in your organization, because things are going to be different across the world. They're going to land differently. They're going to be affected differently. So you have to make sure you understand it. And last call, Doug, I mentioned that it's really important that when you're dealing with many different cultures, that you have a great, at least basic idea of how that culture runs, meaning what how to communicate, how to what does good look like, what does bad look like, what pothole should I be aware of that's in front of me, and just try to stay away from those. And so but you need that. So it's just a matter of really learning, really understanding everything about these different cultures, and then getting everybody included in the answer. If you have everybody's feedback, you're going to be able to make great decisions. Great decisions, not good decisions, great decisions. And in areas where the decision you make that disagree is different than what somebody else might have put, you can probably do a one-off conversation with that person or a few people to find out, how can we make the answer that I came up with work in your area or work for you under your situation? Because that could be that could be the difference between creating a good culture and a great culture, and somebody saying that I heard you, but I can't do it the way you want me to do it. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love that. Thank you. And thank you, Darren. I agree in terms of that approach. That makes a lot of sense. In a related question, how then on the front end side of it, how we ask questions, how we communicate, for instance, the way you just described communicating, should we be adjusting our own style to work across different cultures? People perceive things differently as being direct or indirect and circular in a variety of different ways. And I saw that by living in Japan for so long. And when I came back to the US, I was perceived as this weird person. They didn't know what to think of that circular person who was communicating all the way around stuff instead of direct. Get a Dutch person speaking with a Japanese, and it's like all hell will break loose because they're going to come at it from different ways. But as a good leader, you have to at least be aware of those dynamics, right? How should we adjust our style?
Well, so we talked about cultural intelligence, right? That's cultural intelligence, right? So, by the way, the two ideal things, Doug, Dutch and the Asian, Japanese, couldn't be more diametrically opposed in how they attack. And if you're on the same meeting and they're in the room, you have to understand how you might have to interpret or reword certain things, especially if it seems off-putting to somebody else. And it's the communication you have before or after the call. Now, so it's like, Doug, if you had, let me give you an example. I had a boss that was from France, and Paris, and she would have a meeting, and she was very direct, and the words she used, you could see the 4 or 5 Americans like twitch, jump, whoa, no, and it was a strong word. And I would say to her after, I said, what did you mean when you said these terms? And she would say it, and the context that we took it and what she wanted the word to mean was completely different, right? So it took the group over a year to understand that she would use, I'd use quote unquote harsher words, but the meaning behind it was a lot softer, if that made any sense, right?
Okay.
So what she should have done was it was really after the call, or really understand, how did the message that I just talked to land with you? Was it what did you get out of that? What exactly? And she would have, it would have taken the group a lot less time, probably 3 months to get to her and have her change or slightly adjust her style. But that's what we have to do as leaders, is really understand, have some cultural intelligence about what's going on, and really either talk to them differently, or say to that Dutch person, you probably need to, and with this group, you probably need to soften the words you use and be less direct than normal, to get the outcome or impact that you're looking for. And it's the same thing if you're a leader who's very direct. Now, Doug, you lived in Japan, but you also lived in the East Coast, and you live in the West Coast now, right?
Yes.
2 different things, right? West Coast, West Coast, California, in New York, they communicate very differently, right? And the speed, the language speed is also dramatically different. When I'm similar, so I was in Connecticut for most of my young life, and then when I moved to Arizona, when I went to the school, people thought I was talking too fast, driving too fast, I was too aggressive. Like they didn't. You talked about being aliens. That's how it felt for them, or felt for me, because they didn't understand me, because I was. So it's not just different countries, cultures. It happens right in the United States, how people react differently. So I'm going to ask this question to you, Doug. How do you, when you go back to New York, what do you do differently almost immediately?
I check my language and I listen more, to them, but then I find myself being carried away by the speed and the loudness of that, and you adjust. I remember and I think it's fair to say her name, Susan Asadi, who's from Brooklyn, and she came to Arizona, and she seemed just like a normal person, like an Arizonan, and everything was fine. And she went back to New York, and within 3 months, when I got on the phone with her, it was like, oh my God, she's back to being Brooklyn again. And we've seen New Yorkers that are raw New Yorkers come to Arizona, and it's stunning, in terms of how they act. It's very different. So, but then when you jump back into it, you speed you speed up, right? Just to be able to keep up, or at least that's what I did.
Yeah, and it's also you talk about being direct and don't take anything personally or very little, everything,
Yeah.
typically where you're in Arizona or California or Japan, it doesn't. People are hurt. You lose friendships very quickly because you do that. So as a leader, you have to understand where you are, how you talk, not only the words you use, but the tone you use, right? And be very mindful. And the one that I mean, I'm going to repeat this over and over again is you have to check in to ensure that the impact of your message was exactly what you wanted for every region of the world that you're dealing with. The more you do that, the better you do that, the faster the impact you'll have, the appropriate impact that you are going for, you'll have on the people who work with you or for you in those areas.
But ultimately, how do you measure how well you're doing?
So it's a great thing, great questions. You've heard the term what gets measured, right? What gets measured gets managed. But also, if you also do poor measurement, that also leads to mismanagement, right? So what you want to measure big things that are universal to every area. So something like people development is measurable, is the same everywhere, right? You talked about the numbers, the growth percentages, it's the same everywhere, right? So you want to measure those, and those are easy, right? Sometimes how you get to those numbers, like employee engagement, is something you can measure, but how do you get to employee engagement might be different. So you might have to measure the leading indicators in that country differently, right? And so again, you have to find out what the boots on the ground, what's happening, how do you guys get to this level? What do you do? And then you measure that. And you might not have that measurement at all in your home country at all. But in that country, that's important. That's what's really important. If you go to, and I'll use the US because it's still interesting. So if you go to a place like Miami, where there's 5 different cultures in those areas, one of the cultures, they get their information and their leadership from the radio. Another culture, they get it from this this building where they house everything, our barber shop, the doctor, they get everything in one building, and they go there every day. The entire community goes there every day, and so everything is centered around that. So they get their information, so you have to figure out how to lead, how to manage with those situations. So that's what it is, Doug. It's thinking about those areas on a regular basis and measuring exactly what it is in that small community for the local, and then some stuff that's huge that goes across all lines, measure that also. And that's the best way to get measured, to understand how effective you're going to be, because they're going to tell you something different in every country.
I've got one more question, and then we'll open up the floor
Sure.
for comments and questions. And that's around leadership programs that help us get what we need, the tools to be prepared for these kinds of situations where we're trying to have an impact. We're moving people that have different cultures and different perspectives. Or how do people learn to be able to do that?
So the best companies take a leader and they put them in the different situations. So you want to be able to get in these different situations so they're exposed to different cultures, right? So and so they're exposed, so they know what to do. Then they get the experience in that. So it's exposure, experience, and reflection. So they're the exposure in those areas, right? And they go, wow, that's much different than how I would handle it in this situation. And then you reflect on it, and overall, because you just can't, if you don't reflect on what exactly it is in Japan versus Germany versus, I mean, in the Netherlands, then you're not gonna learn. You're not gonna be a great leader. You have to that's got to be imprinted in your brain of how I communicate better. What do I say differently? How can I get when all three of them in the room? What's the best way? Should I slow down, speed up, talk loud, talk soft? Should I? Because some places we talked about this before in communication. If you're silent, in some cultures that's acceptance. In some cultures that's disagreement. So having known all of those things together, right, is really how you get people to be better leaders, because you expose them to those situations. Then that experience helps them be great leaders, because now they're on stage and they know people are coming in from this area, they know how to talk, right? They know how to talk to them. They know what they mean by that. They understand how to communicate appropriately with that person. So it's really those three things, right? It's exposure, experience, and reflection.
And I'd like to open up the floor, and so feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. While we're doing that, feel free to go ahead. I have what your answer was inspired me to think about a situation or situations that get in the way, and that's I find that people tend to be very judgmental about the situation that they're in, and judgmental about people, and judgmental about the responses they're getting. It's human nature, right? We're judging ourselves, we're judging other people, we're judging the situation we're in and trying to just kind of figure it out. And positive intelligence has helped me recognize the judge part and to stop judging and just accept whatever is happening. And that's really hard. How does a leader do that effectively? Because if you're in a situation and you get a response from someone and you may not know what culture they're from, you don't exactly know how to take it, right? And or at least that's sometimes like they say something and it's like, oh my God, they hate what I'm doing, or oh my God, they love what I'm doing. But both of those could be false.
Yes.
Does it come back to questions again and asking questions and confirming?
Yeah, it's still one of the easiest questions is tell me more or expand. Give me a specific example or something short, but so and maybe you understand it, but you think your audience or the people in the group aren't completely clear. And instead of you explaining it, you would want them to give a big example of what they would mean by that. And so it's always better to ask a follow-up question about whatever they said. Even if, by the way, even if it's great, you still want to ask if somebody says this is the best thing, tell me, and just say, how did that impact you? How is it going to help you be better? What can others learn from, so there's lots of small questions that you can ask as a follow-up to get more and better information from that, and that'll also give you a chance to see how you might be able to be better in the future. So always ask a follow-up question, but not long. Just something like, can you expand? Help me understand. I like that. Yes, those help me understand questions or for the group to make sure everyone is going the same. You can say something like, to make sure everyone's on the same page. Could you give us an example? Something like that.
The lady who was your boss, the French lady,
Yes.
probably didn't do that.
No, she did not. She didn't do that, and she was embarrassed when I told her how the group took it. Right, and it took her literally a while to because it was automatic, because it was a culture of style, you know. And after I told her a couple of times, I was now able to, on the call in real time, say, I think you mean this. And she would say, oh, yes, yeah. So I could help her correct, because she knew I wasn't trying to interfere with her leadership. I was trying to help her and support her so she'd get the message across. So it got along really well, but it took her a while to get acclimated to some of those words, and some of those phrases and terms just don't translate the way you think they do. They have a different meaning than somebody, and that's what that's what happens. You're like, I don't think you meant to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. But Darren, thank you for the comments. You don't need to unmute yourself if you don't if you're not prepared or you're in a bad place. But thank you for the comments. Very, very helpful. It sounds like you've digested this before, and knowing about you and your cross-cultural activities. Undoubtedly, these issues of you've had to deal with these in the past. So thanks for joining today, and looking forward to catching up at some point. I think then the next step for us then is just continue the dialogue. One of the great things that you've been able to provide, Rutherford, is a continued dialogue on this really important topic of leadership, because of the reasons we talked about earlier. What, in conclusion, what would you like to leave with us today?
No, I think actually how we started is that there's no end to leadership. There's a different situation. So one of the things, when I talk to people, ask me, so what program do you have? And I go, I don't have programs, because there could be two identical situations, seemingly identical situations, but you would handle them completely differently, because the people the people are different, the history is different, the cultures are different, and so you're not gonna answer, you're not gonna solve the problem the same way. It just if you try to, one of those answers is definitely going to be wrong, right? Because you didn't look at the context of that situation and the people in the situation. So every single time you lead, Doug mentioned John Maxwell's book. It's called Great Leaders Ask Great Questions. And that's what you do. Great leaders ask great questions, and they don't jump. They don't hear one side and go off. They hear the whole situation, right? And then they can come up with an answer, or help the participants come up with their answer. But that you don't jump, you figure it out, because it's different for every situation. And the best way to be a great leader is by listening aggressively to everything, and then you can give a really, really thoughtful answer that hopefully satisfies or helps the situation go for all parties concerned. But you don't get there by listening to one, or believing one, or not believing one, or saying, well, this person has a history of not telling. You listen to everybody.
And to do that, you've got to pull it out. You've got to ask questions to be able to go
Yeah.
around the room and make sure you have it.
Yes. You're never, you always get half the situation, half the truth. Because, it's like watching a drama, and you see from the cameras giving you one point of view, but you're not seeing the other side. And then you get to the other side and go, oh, that's really what happened. Like the best movies do that. They get you going towards this direction, and then actually it's more this direction because you haven't got the whole picture yet. So those are the situations. That's what happens all the time. And and sometimes they're complicated. They're very complicated. And it's typically might not be a simple, hey, do this and you'll be done. You might have to do two, three things, have multiple meetings, have different situations, talk to these people. And it only comes from really understanding the entire 360 degrees of what's going on.
Thank you for taking the time today. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for giving us a little bit more to be able to navigate through these crazy times. These epic crazy times make it more complicated to do that, right? It's like, how many people do you need to speak with to figure out what the real truth of what's going on is? It seems like there's more that we need to do to sort through in many ways. And so thank you for giving us a few more tools today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks everybody for attending. And if you'd like to get a hold of Rutherford, and you should, feel free to contact him in LinkedIn or through Global Chamber, or some way, shape, or form, come through me. I'm happy to make introductions to Rutherford. Every time I do, something really good happens. So feel free to jump in.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great night.
Thanks. Thanks, Demetrius, for joining. Appreciate it. Hope you're well.
Thanks. Always a great topic.
Thanks, Demetrius.
Take care, Demetrius. Take care, everybody.